grip. Go pull my shit up. Go pull my shit up.
Yeah.
What if I told you that one of hip-hop's most respected legends, the same man who built the South's legacy brick by brick, has secretly carried 6 grudges that shaped the entire culture? Scarface, the voice of the streets and the soul of the Geto Boys, isn't just the philosopher of pain and politics. Behind that calm demeanor lies decades of betrayal, rivalries, and bitterness toward people who either wronged him or twisted his legacy. And today, we're counting down the 6 artists Scarface hated the most, the ones who said shit about him,
Out of every body in the world, he the only motherfucker that can say some shit.
betrayed his trust, or embodied everything he despised about the music game. Because when it comes to Scarface, respect is earned, not bought. And these 6, they lost it. Coming in first is Lil Troy.
You had this beef with this individual, Little Troy, and he was saying a whole lot of
The Houston rapper who once shared the same grind as Scarface, but ended up becoming one of the few names Face could never forgive. The story goes way back, before the fame, before the plaques, before Houston hip-hop turned national. Back then, Scarface was the voice of the streets through the Geto Boys, while Lil Troy was hustling his own way into the city's rap ecosystem, known for ambition and heavy street ties. When Troy finally broke through in 1999 with Wanna Be a Baller, it looked like Houston was having a moment. But behind the scenes, things between the two rappers were already poisoned. Years before his rise, Lil Troy had been tied to a federal drug case, a mark that would follow him. Houston in those days was small. Everybody knew everybody, and every rumor echoed through barbershops and studios. But what turned quiet tension into open hostility was what happened years later. Out of nowhere, Lil Troy went public accusing Scarface of being a snitch. It wasn't just gossip. He said Face had cooperated with law enforcement, that he'd told somebody.
Right now, he was basically alleging that you had...
In the code of the streets, that's the worst thing you can say about another man. For Scarface, it wasn't just false. It was unforgivable. When Scarface finally responded, it was with fire. In an interview that's now legendary among Houston rap fans, Face didn't just deny it. He swore on everything that mattered to him. His exact words were chilling. If I ever told on anybody, I want my entire bloodline to be wiped out.
I want my entire fucking bloodline to be wiped out.
He looked straight into the camera, calm but deadly serious. It wasn't a soundbite. It was a curse. That moment told everyone this wasn't just music beef. This was about honor. Scarface explained he'd never had a police case, never been in court for anything federal, and that Troy's accusation came from pure hate. After that, the bridge burned completely. Scarface said he had nothing else to say to Troy, ever. He refused interviews that tried to force reconciliation. He told one host, "Some people you just can't let back in your space. Once they show you who they are, believe them." The silence between them became louder than any diss track. Inside Houston, fans split into camps. Some felt Scarface, with his reputation for wisdom and pride, was standing his ground like a man should. Others thought he was too proud, that he should have moved on. But for Scarface, forgiveness wasn't even on the table. To him, Lil Troy had committed the kind of disrespect that destroys trust forever. Even years later, when Troy kept bringing up Face in interviews, Scarface never budged. He didn't clap back on records, didn't post online, didn't throw subliminals. He just erased Troy from his world. That kind of cold dismissal hit harder than any diss. In Scarface's mind, once your name is stained, you don't exist. What made it even deeper was the contrast. Scarface had always preached loyalty and integrity in his lyrics, themes that built his legend. To be called a snitch under that legacy was like someone trying to erase his life's message. He wasn't going to let that stand. For Lil Troy, maybe it was publicity. For Scarface, it was blood oath serious. The fallout left a shadow over Houston's unity for years. Collaborations that could have happened never did. OGs picked sides quietly, and though time has passed, the energy never changed. Scarface never apologized, never hinted at peace, never softened the tone. Because when he said, "I'd rather die with honor than live fake," he meant it. That's the line he lived by. And that's why Lil Troy, once a peer, became the first name on Scarface's unspoken blacklist. Next up at number 2 is J. Prince, the godfather of Houston hip-hop, the founder of Rap-A-Lot Records, and the man who helped shape Scarface's destiny. Their relationship wasn't just business. It was brotherhood, forged in ambition, loyalty, and later, betrayal. Without J. Prince, there might never have been a Scarface. Without Scarface, Rap-A-Lot might never have reached national fame. They built a dynasty together, But somewhere between gold records and boardroom deals, the foundation cracked. In the late 80s, when Houston was still fighting for recognition, J. Prince had the vision. He wasn't a rapper, he was the architect, building Rap-A-Lot records from his car lot money and sheer determination. Scarface, then a young and hungry lyricist, became one of his most prized discoveries. Together, they turned the Geto Boys into Southern hip-hop royalty. They took dark street poetry and made it mainstream, long before Atlanta or Memphis had a foothold. Fans saw it as a perfect alliance. J. Prince the boss, Scarface the voice. But as Rap-A-Lot grew, so did the tension. Scarface began noticing things that didn't sit right. In interviews years later, he hinted at money that didn't add up, checks that came late, credits that mysteriously went missing, and a feeling that the business side was never transparent.
He put records out, and I knew when they came, I only knew that the motherfuckers were coming out when they came out.
He never called J. Prince a thief outright, but the tone said everything. Sometimes, Scarface once said, you give your all to something and realize the house you built doesn't belong to you. That line echoed like a confession, a scar of lost trust. J. Prince, ever the businessman, saw things differently. He claimed to have given Scarface everything he needed: exposure, infrastructure, family. To Prince, loyalty meant gratitude. To Scarface, loyalty meant fairness. The clash of those definitions set off a quiet war that would never fully heal. By the early 2000s, the split was obvious. Scarface stopped showing up at Rap-A-Lot events. Photos of reunions never included him. Younger Houston rappers would shout out both men, but never in the same sentence. When Scarface dropped The Fix on Def Jam South, fans noticed he was moving independently, his lyrics sharper, his tone colder. He started warning young artists to own your masters and never sell your soul, lines that many believed were aimed directly at J. Prince. They weren't diss tracks, but they cut deep, coded lessons from a man who'd learned the hard way. Then came the heartbreak years later, when Scarface's health began to fail. In 2020, after surviving COVID and struggling with kidney issues, he revealed he'd felt abandoned by people he once called family. Fans immediately thought of J. Prince. Some accused the Rap-A-Lot boss of turning his back on the man who helped build his empire. Others defended him, saying business and personal life should never mix. But through it all, Scarface never said Prince's name, and that silence was louder than any accusation. Occasionally, Prince would post tributes to Houston legends, Bun B, Pimp C, UGK, Slim Thug, but he'd skip over Scarface. It was deliberate, almost ceremonial, as if both men had agreed to erase each other from history. Yet everyone knew the truth. Without Scarface, Rap-A-Lot's crown would never have fit. Decades later, the wound remains. Scarface has achieved peace in music, but never reconciliation in business. He still speaks about integrity, ownership, and pride, the same virtues that made him clash with the man who discovered him. J. Prince, meanwhile, continues running his empire, his name synonymous with power and silence. Their story is a reminder that sometimes the people who build you are also the ones who break you. Scarface once said, "I've been loyal to people who didn't deserve it." Fans knew exactly who he meant, because when you build something from the ground up and feel like it's stolen from you, that pain never fades, it just hardens. And if business betrayal hurt Scarface this deeply, wait until you hear about number 3, a New York titan who took shots at him without ever saying his name. Coming in third is 50 Cent. At number 3 is 50 Cent, the self-proclaimed king of New York beefs, a rapper who turned conflict into currency, and one of the few artists bold enough to make enemies coast to coast. Scarface never set out to clash with him. He had nothing to prove. But in hip-hop, you don't always choose your battles. Sometimes a single feature, a misunderstood verse, or the wrong cosign is enough to start a war. It all began with a song called Snitch. Scarface dropped it in 2006, featuring fellow Houston rapper Z-Ro, a gritty, emotional storyteller who'd long been compared to 50 Cent for his melodic, pain-driven street music. But Snitch wasn't just another street record. Z-Ro used his verse to take direct shots at 50 Cent, accusing him of hypocrisy and questioning his street credibility. He rapped lines that clearly pointed to 50's image as just because someone in his crew had a problem with 50 Cent. The problem?
They got a problem with me, because I mean, shit.
Scarface was on the track too, and to outsiders, it looked like he was co-signing every word. When Snitch hit the streets, fans immediately tied the diss to Scarface, assuming he shared Zero's sentiments. 50 Cent didn't take that lightly. For a man who built an empire on retaliation, association was enough to make you an enemy. From that point on, the tension between 50 and Scarface quietly brewed. Scarface tried to make it clear that the shots weren't his. He didn't name names, didn't fuel the drama, didn't even respond publicly. That was never his lane. But to 50, silence can sound like arrogance. Soon, 50 began throwing subliminal jabs in interviews, mocking old rappers from the South still trying to stay relevant, and questioning whether some legends were still legends without controversy. Fans knew exactly who he was talking about. But Scarface wasn't built for petty squabbles. He came from a different school, one rooted in authenticity, storytelling, and truth. In one interview, when asked about rappers who thrive off conflict, he said, "Some people chase war because they can't win with words." It was subtle, but it hit deep. Scarface didn't need to clap back. He let time and legacy speak for him. Still, the damage was done. What could have been mutual respect between two powerful street narrators turned into quiet disdain. 50 kept making headlines for his relentless feuds, from Ja Rule to The Game to Rick Ross, while Scarface stood apart, representing everything hip-hop was supposed to mean before it became a business of beefs. Years later, when 50 mocked older rappers as dinosaurs, Scarface didn't flinch. He told The Breakfast Club, "Some people make war their business. I make truth mine." That line instantly reignited the speculation. Fans flooded forums and YouTube comments, linking the quote back to their old tension, saying it was the ultimate response. Calm, philosophical, and deadly precise. Because the truth is, Scarface never needed to win the feud. His entire career was proof that you could dominate without noise. He didn't need to sell controversy or chase headlines, and that's exactly what bothered 50. He couldn't control the narrative. Scarface represented the kind of respect that money can't buy and clout can't touch. The two never made peace, never collaborated, and likely never will. But their silent standoff revealed something deeper about hip-hop, that the loudest man in the room doesn't always hold the power. Sometimes, strength looks like stillness. Scarface didn't destroy 50 Cent with a verse. He did it with absence, by refusing to even acknowledge him. And in hip-hop, being ignored by a legend is often worse than being dissed by one. But if you think this tension was heavy, just wait. The next one hit closer to home. Because number 4 isn't an outsider or an enemy. It's family. A brother from the same soil whose bond with Scarface turned from brotherhood to bitterness. At number 4 is Willie D, Scarface's brother-in-arms from the legendary Geto Boys. Together, they rewrote Southern hip-hop history, turning Houston street stories into national anthems. But behind the iconic records and fierce loyalty, their brotherhood cracked under pressure. The Geto Boys were never strangers to chaos. Fights, walkouts, and raw honesty were part of their DNA. Yet by the late 90s, tension between Willie D and Scarface had turned from creative friction into something darker, resentment wrapped in pride. It started small. Studio disagreements about writing credits, royalties, and leadership blurred into personal jabs. Willie D felt Scarface was being positioned as the group's sole star, the face of the Geto Boys, while the rest faded into the background. In interviews, Willie D once admitted, Face thought the group revolved around him. It wasn't said with anger, but with that heavy disappointment that only comes from family. Scarface never denied being the group's focal point. He owned it. His reply was just as cutting. When you put your heart into every verse and people still act like you owe them, that's betrayal. From that point, fans could feel the distance. Performances became rare, press appearances awkward. When Scarface launched his solo career, it felt like a quiet divorce. Willie D focused on business ventures, while Scarface became the philosophical poet of the South. Still, neither could erase what they'd built. Songs like Mind Playing Tricks on Me stood as proof of their chemistry, the kind of magic that couldn't be replicated, even if the men behind it no longer spoke. Years later, Willie D reinvented himself as a blunt cultural commentator on YouTube. He dissected politics, race, and hip-hop hypocrisy, and sometimes those commentaries included veiled shots at old friends. Scarface never responded directly, but his music did the talking. On later albums, he slipped in lines about brothers who turned critics and voices that used to cheer now talking down. Fans instantly knew who he meant. It wasn't just another rap sub, it was a confession, disguised as art. The tension reached a painful climax in 2023 when the Geto Boys' legacy was celebrated on the Grammy Awards Hip Hop 50 tribute. Scarface took the stage and delivered Mind-Playing Tricks on Me, the song that defined their careers, but Willie D wasn't beside him. Viewers cheered, unaware that back in Houston, Willie D was watching, stunned. Within hours, he went on his podcast, furious, saying he felt snubbed and disrespected. He was hurt that it was a song he co-wrote, and he was not included.
When we left here, I said, "What you got for the weekend?" You said, "I'm finna go fuck with this Grammy stuff."
Scarface defended himself, saying the Grammy producers called him specifically, and he had no control over who was invited, so it is not his fault.
And if a motherfucker didn't reach out to you, it's not my fault. So don't put that shit on me, Willie. That's not cool.
But to fans, the damage was done. What was supposed to be a celebration of unity became a symbol of division. Two men who once shared microphones were now separated by ego, miscommunication, and decades of unspoken pain. And if that felt personal, just wait. Number 5 involves one of the biggest rappers alive today, a superstar whose rise represents everything Scarface can't stand about the modern industry. Number 5 is Drake, the global megastar from Toronto, and one of the few artists Scarface has openly admitted he just doesn't get. In a world where numbers and charts define greatness, Scarface still believes in soul, storytelling, and truth. Drake, for him, represents the opposite, calculated emotion packaged for profit. Scarface once said during a 2015 interview that hip-hop lost its heart when rappers stopped bleeding on tracks. Fans immediately linked that to Drake's ghostwriting scandal, which exploded that same year. While Scarface never mentioned him by name, the timing was obvious. And when asked directly about Drake in another podcast, he said, "That ain't hip-hop, that's business." It was clear he saw Drake as the face of everything wrong with the genre: manufactured authenticity, label-driven narratives, and fame without struggle. The tension deepened when Drake began championing Houston culture. Still, he never attacked Drake directly. Instead, he used his platform to warn the next generation, don't let the game turn you into a product. Fans interpreted it as shade, respectful but firm, the way a disappointed father speaks about a wayward son. And when you listen to Scarface's later albums, especially tracks like God Is My Friend and Black Still, you hear his quiet frustration at how rap turned into an industry of image. But Scarface's patience truly ran out with the last one. Number 6, a rapper whose futuristic sound became the symbol of everything Scarface believes destroyed the heart of hip-hop. Rounding out the list at number 6 is Future, the trap icon from Atlanta. Scarface never targeted him personally, but make no mistake, Future's entire style represents the generational divide that Scarface despises. The auto-tune, the drug-influenced lyrics, the celebration is of numbness. It's the antithesis of Scarface's pain-driven realism. In interviews, Scarface often laments that today's rap lacks soul. He talks about how artists don't feel anymore, they just record, and fans know exactly who that's aimed at. When asked about the new wave of trap rappers dominating charts, he said, "If your music don't make somebody cry, then what's it for?" Future, whose catalog is filled with emotion masked by codeine and distortion, embodies that paradox. And Scarface hates what it represents, the commercialization of pain without meaning. Still, Scarface doesn't mock the youth. He warns them. He said, "I don't blame them, I blame the system that rewards emptiness." But even so, he's admitted that this new era ain't my kind of hip-hop. 6 names, 6 grudges, 6 chapters in the complicated legacy of a man who never compromised. Every one of them reflects a wound Scarface carries not out of hate, but out of heartbreak for what hip-hop has lost. Because behind every feud, every rumor, every silence, lies a man who gave his soul to music and watched the world move on without him. What do you think? Were these rivalries justified, or did pride cloud a legend's judgment? Drop your thoughts below, because this story is far from over.